He has shifted to Delhi to practice before the Honorable Supreme Court. Sir has appeared in several important matters such as Aruna's case, which was related to right to life and death, so die with dignity. It was a very important matter and got much in news. Maharashtra bar dancers case, Jallikattu case, we all are aware of that. Sir has also been appointed as amicus curiae in several important matters. One of them is Sahara India's case. We, uh, we are all glad to have him today, and I would now request Adarsh Kothari from MIT Law School, Noida, to present Sir a bouquet. Now, by not wasting much time, I would like to welcome Sir from my side and would like to hand over mic to him.
Good evening, friends. Am I audible?
Yes,
Loud
sir.
and clear?
Yes.
You are all aware what is the topic today. It's a very complex issue. The provisions of the Constitution appear to be simple, crystal clear. But historical developments, both political and constitutional, and in the legal field, have complicated the issue. Appointment of judges of the Supreme Court and High Court is the burning issue of the day. Let's analyze what has happened in this country. In order to understand the full implications of the present problem, you must know a bit of political history and the history of constitutional law. Every important question in constitutional law basically has political implications. No question of constitutional law is a pure question of law. It has political overtones. It has political implications. And I will explain to you why this issue today has assumed very disturbing proportions. Let's see briefly the history of political history of India after 1947. From 1947 to 1964, we had a towering personality who was the Prime Minister of India, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. He not only had an absolute majority in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, and he had his own moral stature. This had its impact on the mindset of the Supreme Court judges. Therefore, during Nehru's regime, there was no controversy of any kind whatsoever about appointment of judges. Article 124, clause 2 says that the President shall appoint a Supreme Court judge, or Article 217 says High Court judge, in consultation with the Chief Justice and such other judges of the High Court as the President may deem fit. Throughout 17 years of Nehru's regime, there was no controversy. The initiative in making appointments was with the government. Government would send the recommendations to the Chief Justice and the Chief Justice would approve. And on very, very rare occasions, there was some measure of disagreement, but that was resolved amicably. So we had no occasion to examine what are the true implications of Article 124 or 217. But you must also remember that because of such a towering personality and the political executive being powerful, the balance of power structure, you are all aware of the fact that the Constitution of India tries to maintain a balance of power structure in the three wings of the state. That is the executive, that is the government in power, the judiciary and the legislature. So this is in 17 years of Nehru's regime, the primacy was of the Prime Minister in the matters of appointment of. Nobody tested it because there was no occasion. You will also find that this is reflected in the development of constitutional law also. Take the first amendment to the Constitution by which 9th schedule was inserted and certain laws were kept beyond the pale of Articles 14, 19, etc. That entire constitutional amendment was upheld by the Supreme Court in Shankar Prasad's case, which again goes to show that the political executive, that is the Prime Minister in office, has a powerful impact on the working of the court. After Nehru's death, there is a second phase. We had Shastriji for a while, then came Madam Indira Gandhi. Now remember 1967, what happened? We have Golaknath's case. In 1967, the Congress government led by Srimati Gandhi was virtually a minority government, depended upon the support of other political parties. The 1967 elections brought about a sea change in the political map of India. Several regional parties like DMK came to power in Tamil Nadu. So the political executive became weak. You understand my point? In other words, the space occupied by the political executive in the balance of power structure, came to be occupied by the court. In other words, the power of the executive was reduced and the court's power in the balance of power structure tilted in favor of the judiciary, and therefore you have Golaknath case which says that Parliament has no right to touch the fundamental rights. This is the second phase. The third phase, after 1971 Bangladesh liberation, Vajpayee described Indira Gandhi as Durga, and Mrs. Gandhi had an absolute political power. She got a huge majority in Parliament. So the political power again became very powerful. And what was the result? And this is the beginning of the problem. 1973. Three senior most judges of the Supreme Court, Justice Grover, Justice Sikri and Justice Hegde, were superseded, and Justice N. Ray, who was fourth in rank, was appointed as Chief Justice. And the then Minister, Mr. Mohan Kumar Mangalam on the floor of the House said that we need judges who belong, who accept the philosophy of the government in power. So this primacy in the matter of appointment of judges went with the political power, that is the executive government in power. All right, then came emergency, 75. I am not aware how many of you have seen those dark days, but those of us who were unfortunate or fortunate saw what happened in this country. Democracy was in ICU. We had the fear of we becoming a totalitarian state. But the people of India showed a remarkable courage, and we resisted emergency, we resisted authoritarian rule, and the structure of emergency had to be dismantled. Elections were called, Congress lost, Janata Party came into power. Now this was an important political development, and it has its reflection in the judiciary, which I will demonstrate to you in 2 minutes. Now you saw in 73, 3 senior judges superseded, nobody to question the government. During emergency, Justice Khanna delivered the dissenting judgment in habeas corpus case, where Supreme Court took the view that during emergency, if a police officer shoots a citizen, he has no remedy because fundamental rights are abrogated. Shocking judgment. The judiciary buckled in, surrendered its judicial sovereignty to the political power. See the political implication. Judgments are never delivered on pure questions of law. Then the people of India, when they could, through their political power, the people's power, could restore democracy in this country, you again see its reflection in the judiciary. The new government came. This was an atmosphere of pluralism in the country. The new government, led by Janata Party, did not have the kind of authoritarian power that Srimati Gandhi had. Now, therefore, the space in the balance of power structure, the space of the executive got reduced. The judiciary again tried to expand its space, and therefore you have the first judgment in Sethi's case. What happened exactly in Sethi's case? Justice Sethi of the Gujarat High Court, during emergency, to be precise in May 1976, was transferred from Gujarat High Court to Andhra by way of punishment because he delivered a judgment against the government during emergency. He was bold enough to tell the government that you are wrong. So to punish him, he was sent to Andhra Pradesh, and that came to be challenged. Gujarat High Court held that his transfer is bad. The reason given by Gujarat High Court was that under Article 222, that is 222 Clause 1, requires consultation with the Chief Justice, and there was no effective consultation. Now the words are almost similar to Article 124(2). The Gujarat High Court during emergency took the view that this is bad. Matter came here. By that time, Mrs. Gandhi had lost the political power. And the very same judges who held in habeas corpus case that a citizen can be shot dead by a police officer and yet he has no remedy. The very same judges took the view that no, government's action was wrong because there was no effective consultation. Look how the law changes with the change in the political structure. And they said that there was no effective consultation with the Chief Justice of India, and therefore there is no consultation in the eyes of law. It is in breach of Article 222, Clause 1. They set aside the transfer of a judge. Now this was the beginning of the judiciary flexing its muscles, if I may say so. The Janata Party unfortunately had its brief tenure, it collapsed because of internal contradictions. Again there was a political vacuum for a while. 1980 elections were held, Janata Party lost, Mrs. Gandhi came back to power. Now she was a different Mrs. Gandhi. For the simple reason that the people of India had taught her a lesson. Because in 77 elections, she herself lost the election. Her son also lost the election. The Congress party was virtually wiped out in the northern part of India. It could retain some seats in the southern part of this country. So she was a different Mrs. Gandhi. Though the person was same, but the political power was of a different kind, of a much softer nature. Now, judiciary had already tested blood. In Seth's case, they thought that no, we also have some power under the constitution to tell the government you are wrong. So then comes the 1981 or 1980 SP Gupta's case. In SP Gupta's case, this issue was again considered. What has the court held in SP Gupta's case? Again the word consultation. See, a simple word like consultation changes its connotation, changes its color, changes its meaning, changes its effect with a change in the political power structure. Then the very same judges who delivered that famous judgment in habeas corpus case, they said no, consultation has to be effective. And normally, the views of the Chief Justice must be respected. And it is only in the rare cases and in exceptional cases that the government may send the file back and request the Chief Justice to reconsider. So a midpoint, the pendulum at one end are the absolute primacy of the government in power. Now midpoint, effective consultation. Normally you should accept what we are saying. And exceptional cases for good and cogent reasons, the government may not accept. See, a semblance of balance in the power structure came into being. SP Gupta case. Now, as I said, this was decided in 1981 and Mrs. Gandhi was a different person. Now the next page is 91, which is that case. The Supreme Court Advocates on Record Association versus Union of India. Now, when this case was decided by the Supreme Court, who was in political power? Do you remember? Or perhaps you were kids? Mr. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister of India. And he was leading a minority government. His fate depended upon every day what happens in the Lok Sabha. A very clever, practical, pragmatic Prime Minister. There is an interesting anecdote about him to lighten the discussion. Some people, Congress people, went to him and said, "Sir, people are saying you don't take any decision." So he said, "If I take a decision on this side, then there will be opposition. I have to run this government for 5 years. But sir, if we don't take a decision, our government won't function. He said, not taking a decision is also a decision. And he said that why should we get re-elected? I have to run this government for 5 years. I said, थोड़ी लिखा है कि हर चुनाव में हम लोग जीते. So he was a weak prime minister. The point which I want to drive home is that the political executive was weak. So we have this judgment of the Supreme Court, Advocate on Records Association versus India. Now what have they done? They have virtually accepted, took away, they seized the political power. They said, no, not merely consultation. What we say is final. Then came the collegium. Earlier, up to S.P. Gupta, 80-81, the initiative was from the central government and the Chief Justice was consulting. Now they have reversed. Said, no, now we will decide whose name should be recommended and you just sign. So the President of India, which means the Council of Ministers, became consultee. See, what is the wording of Article 124(2)? President in consultation with. That means the Chief Justice is the consultee. So now they have reversed the process. They got, because political executive is weak. Now we are running the government. So not only our consent is must, but we will take the initiative. You have the option of sending the file back, and if we again send it back to you, you must accept it. That is the second case. Then came the 98 special reference. They reiterated the same thing. These were judgments of 9 judges. See how judiciary wants to retain the power. Now to overturn a 9 judges case, you need a larger bench. So special reference was a formality because the 9 judges had already taken a view. And it is the prerogative of the Chief Justice to constitute the bench. He may constitute 5 judges bench also. So he obviously can't overturn the larger bench judgment in the second judge's case, or what is known as Supreme Court Advocates Association, AOR Association. So the special reference case was nothing but reiteration of the earlier one. Now see, we have come, 98 is over. And who was the Prime Minister in 98? Then this judgment was delivered. Which party was in power? BJP was in power. But Atalji did not have the kind of political strength that today's Prime Minister has. And of course, it's a difference of personality. Vajpayee ji was a liberal. He had his own ideas of liberalism. So therefore, the political executive in 98 was not authoritarian. And therefore the judiciary. Now, this is not only I am saying, because I am too small a man to sit in judgment of Supreme Court. But two eminent constitutional law experts, H.M. Sirwai and A.G. Nurami, and one Mr. Chinoy. Sirwai goes to the extent of saying that the second judge case, that is AOR versus University of India, is void. That judgment is void. If you read the 4th edition of Sirwai's book, you will find it. What I am saying is nothing. It's a very devastating critic of the Supreme Court. He virtually says that it's a judicial coup. You have seized power which does not rest in you. I am not saying. Silva is saying. Now I'll tell you something more interesting. Who was that Chief Justice? I'm trying to remember his name in 1990. Venkatramaya. If you have, you can just check up. On eve of his retirement, not Venkatramaya, there are two. Venkatramaya, on the eve of his retirement, gave a very interesting interview to a well-known journalist, Kuldeep Nair. And what did he say in that interview? A very disturbing feature. Today we talk of independence of judiciary. I have a lot to say about that also. Because the whole argument in S.P. Gupta's case, in AOR Association wherein there was a special reference that the judiciary is required to be independent. And therefore the power to appoint judges must be with the judiciary. I ask myself a simple question: what happened to the independence of judiciary during emergency? What are we talking about? It is in this context that I am inviting your attention to what Justice Venkatramaya said. Must be Venkatramaya.
So, in 1990, it was Ravindranath Mishra.
When was Venkatramaya? I may be missing the year.
1989.
1989. Sorry, I missed the year. What did he say in that interview? He made a very significant comment. He said today in all 22 high courts, he didn't say about Supreme Court, but I believe that he implied Supreme Court judges also. He said that in every high court there are 4 to 5 judges who every evening go out for whining and dining and corrupt. This is said in the public statement. Somebody took out a contempt petition against him. It's a reported judgment. Please see 1990 or so, Criminal Law Journal. You will find that. This is what a Chief Justice of India has said. Same thing Justice Bharuch has said. That there are corrupt judges. Now therefore, the fact that the whole collegium system has failed, I am not saying that they are only saying. Look at Justice Kannan. How could he be appointed? Any order passed by the Supreme Court, he will sit in Chennai and he will stay that order. Now where is the accountability? Those who are shouting from the housetops about independence of the judiciary, I have a simple question to ask. What happened to this independence of judiciary when you said that a citizen can be shot dead and he has no remedy to it? Where did your independence go? To be independent, you need a moral courage. And that doesn't come from the fact that you are appointed by a brother judge. It comes from within. The judges live in a dream world that they are the only saviors of this country. And there are no moral forces outside the judiciary. This is the dream world in which they are living. We are there still. The people of India are still there. They fought a giant like Mrs. Gandhi. We don't need judiciary to tell us. Anyway, that's a... But this kind of debate that we need the power because we are independent. We want